What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the E4 Explicit podcast. Whether you're listening or watching, today's episode is with Rick Newman, who is a columnist at Yahoo Finance. And he's been a journalist for many years. He covered the Pentagon, which we talk about in this episode. We talk about such things as finance, stock market. I tell him my story of how I could have $250 million right now if I would have just taken the Bitcoin when I had the chance. But you're going to have to find out what I'm talking about in the episode. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that bell notification so you get notified every single time I post new content, which a new episode posts every Friday on Spotify, iTunes, Google, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. So enjoy this episode of the E4 Explicit podcast with Rick Newman, a Yahoo columnist and a journalist. I'll see you next Friday. Peace out. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of E4 Explicit podcast. This is Corey, and today we have a special guest, Rick Newman, who is a columnist. I can never say it. I always want to say columnist at Yahoo Finance.
I had to learn how to say that.
Right? Well,
columnist.
Introduce yourself a little bit and let the people know for watchers and listeners who you are.
Sure. I've been a journalist my whole career. I started out in Washington, D.C. with a news magazine people may have heard of, U.S. News and World Report, now known mainly for college rankings and hospital rankings, but it used to be one of the three major news weeklies along with Time and Newsweek. Anyway, I started there at a good time for magazines, and I was lucky because I got to learn how to do real journalism from real journalists who worked there, including some investigative reporters who taught me a lot. I became the Pentagon reporter there in 1995, I think, and I left that job in 1991 because I moved from DC up to New York following a divorce and a custody lawsuit that I lost. So my ex-wife was allowed to move from DC to New York with our two kids. So I kind of chased my kids and ended up moving to New York, where I still am, 2 months before 9/11. So the defense beat and the Pentagon beat was, it was a good beat at the time, but there wasn't that much happening. The big events in the 1990s, the big one was the first Persian Gulf War, the first Iraq War, which was before my time. I got to the magazine a little bit after that. There goes my phone. I'll turn that off. But then we had the peacekeeping missions in Bosnia and Kosovo, and stuff going on, sort of lower level stuff all around the world. Of course, after 9/11, we had wars all around the world, and I was gone from the beat by then, but we did have other people who came in behind me. And what I did after 9/11 was go down to kind of cover the Pentagon, the building, the people, the generals, and the sources that I had developed over those prior years, while we sent other people, younger guys who didn't have kids, honestly, over to the war in Afghanistan first, and then the war in Iraq after that. So I kind of shuttled down to DC from New York to cover the Pentagon, which just became kind of exhausting and impractical. So I became a business reporter probably by 2003, 2004. Did that for U.S. News and World Report for a while. That magazine was kind of going through the rough transformation into the world of digital news at the time. So it was rough. I have a lot of friends who got laid off and lost their jobs. And eventually I ended up over at Yahoo Finance, which is where I am today. I love working in online journalism. We're not committed. We don't have a TV network we have to support. We don't have a print publication we have to support. We're just digital. So that is a good business model. And that's where I am today. I'm covering business and economics and a lot of things related to politics. So there's a lot of crossover between financial markets and politics. So I covered the 2020 election. I covered Trump's economic policies, trade, and stuff like that, the tariffs. And I'm doing the same with Biden, all the bills he wants to pass. Some of the bills he's already passed. Is the nation going to go bankrupt with the $29 trillion national debt and stuff like that? So I have fun, Corey.
Wow, that's a rap sheet, man. All right, great. So we talked actually before we started about kind of where I discovered you, and it was on the same documentary I discovered Kathleen Puckett, the FBI agent who found the Unabomber, and it was about the Pentagon. And it was this fascinating episode about what goes on at the Pentagon, what are some secrets and stuff like that. Of course, Netflix has got to build that up and make it even more interesting than maybe what it really is. So let's talk about your time at the Pentagon and maybe that write-up or kind of what you did specifically at the Pentagon.
Yeah, the reason that you saw me on that documentary is because I co-authored a book with another guy named Patrick Creed called Firefight: Inside the Battle to Save the Pentagon on 9/11. So my co-author Patrick actually got the idea for this book. It's kind of interesting because I had been the Pentagon correspondent for my magazine right before leading up to 9/11, and I was actually at the Pentagon on 9/11. I was in New York on that day, but my bosses at the magazine, I thought I'd be covering what was going on in New York, but they said, we actually need you down here. You need to go start working the Pentagon. So nobody could get in the Pentagon on 9/11 who wasn't already in there. And of course, they evacuated it. But I was, with all the other journalists standing they set up a media center at a gas station overlooking the Pentagon right on the side of the building that got hit by the airplane. So I saw the Twin Towers burning on 9/11 and I saw the Pentagon burning on 9/11. I mean, weird claim to fame, but not too many people who were in both places on that day. Right. So Patrick knew, he was a volunteer firefighter, and he knew a lot of guys who were in the Arlington County, in the Alexandria County. I may be getting some of these details wrong because it's been a long time since we did this book, so I'll beg forgiveness if I make mistakes. But he knew a lot of the firefighters who had actually been in the building responding to the fire, because the Pentagon does not have its own fire brigade. It relies on local fire jurisdictions. So Pat was hearing all these stories from the firefighters who were in the building, not just on that day. They were in that building for weeks because, I mean, that was an ongoing disaster, just as it was at the site of the Twin Towers. It was very different, obviously, much lower death toll. But so Patrick was hearing these stories about the firefighters, and he wanted to write a book about it, but he wasn't a writer. So he found his way to me, and we put this book together, kind of focusing on the story of the firefighters and the other first responders, which was a lot, the FBI, which ended up being in charge of it as a crime scene, which it was, local police to a lesser extent, but mostly just what it took to basically get the fire put out and save the building. So that's what our book was about. And that's how you came to see me on that show, because the Pentagon is an intriguing place. Very. And a lot of super top secret. I mean, there are levels of classification above top secret that were right in the path of that aircraft and were destroyed and completely blown open. I think if I remember correctly, the Navy's intelligence operation was right in the pathway of that plane. And there was literally top secret documents floating on the air and just blowing through the hallways as firefighters were in there trying to put the fire out.
Oh my God. Did you have to have top secret to work there?
No, journalists don't get security clearances. What will happen sometimes is if you are covering an operation, let's say a field operation, this is when you embed is the word, you embed with a unit. So if you are with a unit, and this has been true as long as journalists have been covering wars, including World War I, including World War II. I mean, if you're with a unit, you are going to have access to at least what is secret information about future operations. Right. And you just make an agreement. Usually it's an explicit agreement that you will not write anything or publish anything about. You can't. I mean, you will not publish any classified information as an embed. Because it could give the enemy information they could use in an operation against you. So journalists are exposed to classified information. Sometimes people leak classified information, and that happens. But there's not normally any procedure for journalists having security clearances, except in unusual situations such as live operations.
That's so crazy. I didn't know that. I figured that journalists had to have some sort of clearance to be with that. There's kind
absolutely
of more
not.
Like
in fact, the Pentagon, it's usually just a giant ongoing battle where they're trying to keep secrets and we're trying to get the secrets.
Wow. So speaking of secrets, I don't know if you saw, you probably did, but the families of 9/11 are trying to get, and I think Biden is actually going to release a lot of confidential stuff about 9/11. I mean, is it going to be like this whole alien thing where they're like, oh yeah, we're going to release alien stuff? It's really not even significant.
The UFO stuff.
Yeah, that stuff's like.
So we're going a little beyond my area of expertise.
I know.
Here's what I know about it. There are legitimate questions about the role of the Saudi Arabian government and of people who might have been linked to the Saudi government and the hijackers on 9/11 and the people who carried out the attack. There have been some indications that the Saudi government may have known about the planning for the attack. There have been, I'm sure there have been some claims that it went beyond that because people will make any claim these days.
Of course.
But the FBI, whatever the FBI knows about this has kept it secret until now. And Biden has said he's going to release that information. So what is it? I have no idea what that information might show. And I mean, you know how these things go. Just because you release information does not often settle the issue these days, because people won't believe the information. People will think some of it's made up. They'll think there's other information the government hasn't released. So we'll see. My guess is that this is going to be inconclusive,
right?
Because if there was some bombshell secret about a direct link to the Saudi government and 9/11, I don't think the way to publish that information would be to just open these raw files. I think if the FBI knows if there is information that has that kind of suggestion, and I think if there is that kind of information, the way to release it would be to do it in some sort of controlled or organized way, rather than just open up these files and let people make what they will of them. So my guess is there's no smoking gun in there that says, aha, the Saudis knew about the 9/11 attacks in advance, or they even abetted the attacks, but we'll see what the information shows.
Right. Yeah. I figured I'd just ask because it's kind of like pertinent information. Yeah, it's very interesting. It's just, of course, it's the 20th anniversary.
And it is a legitimate question. I mean, the Saudis, they are our allies because of oil in the Middle East, but they are not such a friendly government either.
No.
And they play all sides in geopolitics. So, it'll be worth finding out what the FBI knows.
Yeah. And I'm very interested in that. Yeah. The Saudis, I think there was that reporter. Remember the Saudi prince did something to a reporter, but anyway, I don't want to.
Oh, they murdered Jamal Khashoggi.
Exactly.
That was Mohammed bin Salman. He's basically the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia. He had this Saudi journalist who lived and worked in the United States murdered in Turkey. It's very clear that the guy who runs Saudi Arabia ordered this murder operation, and they carved up his body and put it someplace where nobody's been able to find. The Turkish government had the goods on that. They had they were doing they just had all the intelligence, and they for whatever reason the Turks leaked that information right away, and it seems to have been completely clear that this came from the top of the Saudi government. So they murdered a journalist. Right. That is the nature of the Saudi government.
Right. Exactly. That's why when I thought about it, I was like, wow, the Saudis, like they're sketchy. Like they're our allies.
They're sketchy.
Yeah. Right. All right. Let's talk about some finance stuff, because I legit have some questions. And with everything that's happened in the stock market the last 6 to 8 months, I mean, I myself have never been into stocks my life. And then as soon as
you missed out.
No, I know. It's so funny because when GameStop happened too, that whole stuff, the whole short, I guess it was a short sale, whatever happened. I was like, oh yeah, let me get on this. I bought it in GameStop when it was like $350 because I'm like, oh, it's going to go to the moon. And of course it didn't. So then, but then I got some other good stocks that I started doing some research, and I got the Motley Fool. And like I really started diving in and learning a lot. And it was fascinating, all the stuff that goes on with that kind of stuff. So can you kind of like explain maybe the stock market and how that works? Because it's very volatile most times, right?
Which part of the stock market?
I don't know. I didn't know there was multiple parts.
Well, I mean, there are people get PhDs in this
Oh, wow.
to,
Jesus Christ.
understand, degrees in finance, which I don't have. I have a bachelor's degree in economics, so I don't consider myself an expert on the stock market, but I interview people and follow people who are experts. I guess a couple of observations. The stock market, so the S&P 500, which is an index, it's an index of 500 stocks, literally, that you can use just use that as representative of the stock market overall. And the Dow Jones is the same thing, but the Dow Jones only has 30 stocks. So the S&P 500 is what professionals look at, just because it's a broader basket of stocks.
Right.
I think the S&P 500 has hit, I saw this in an analysis recently, 55 new record highs this year. I don't know. I could quickly look it up on my Yahoo Finance. Let me see if I can do this while I'm
This is
talking.
2021.
Yep.
Oh my God.
So let's see. So anybody who wants to do this, you go to finance.yahoo.com. You click on S&P 500 at the top. I'm going to do year to date. So year to date, the S&P 500 is up 21%. So if you had $100 in the S&P 500 at the beginning of the year, you now have $121.
Oh, wow.
That is a fantastic return.
Right.
Over 2 years, over just 1 year. So before I was telling you year to date since January, over the last 12 months, it's up 31%. And over the last 2 years, it's up 52%.
Whoa.
So,
isn't the average like 3 to 8 or something like that, or under 10%?
Yes. So that's a phenomenal level of return.
Right.
And I'm going to guess that it's even higher for the NASDAQ, which is an index of mostly technology stocks. So the stock market has been producing phenomenal returns. And people if you just invest in the S&P 500, and you can do that through a mutual fund or an ETF, many ways, you're making good money.
Right.
And you're right. The average returns in the stock market on an annual basis, I don't know what the number is, but I think it's about 7 or 8%.
Right.
And that includes good years and bad years. I mean, there are years when people lose a lot of money in the stock market, but it's been a fantastic year for stocks. And the reason it's been a fantastic year for stocks is the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, because of what it's doing, the types of monetary stimulus that it's doing, it is just leaving no alternative for people who want to invest money except for stocks. And the short explanation for this, I mean, this is extremely technical, but what the Fed has done is they have forced down interest rates at every time duration. So the Fed can easily lower short-term interest rates because it basically sets short-term interest rates directly. But the Fed has also brought down long-term interest rates. So that's interest rates on anything going from 10 years to 30 years. And importantly, that means mortgage rates, which go along with that. And you just can't make money investing in things that pay like treasury securities or anything else that's benchmarked to treasury securities,
right.
So bonds. So you cannot make money in bonds right now because you're getting on a 10-year treasury, you're getting like 1.3% interest, and inflation is 5.4%. So
right.
You're losing money
if
you invest in, if you think you're keeping your money safe in treasury securities, you're not. You're actually losing money relative to inflation. The Fed knows that. The Fed is doing this on purpose because the Fed can't do everything to manipulate the economy. It can only do a few things, but the few things the Fed can do are very powerful. And the net effect has been super low interest rates ever since the coronavirus pandemic caused a recession starting in March of 2020. Super low interest rates and no alternative to stocks if you're an investor, which is one of the big reasons that stocks are up as much as they have been.
Right.
That can't go on forever, but it can go on a pretty long time, and it will probably keep going on for a little while longer yet.
Really? Yeah. Cause that's what I was thinking. I talked to a couple economists and stuff like that are professors and stuff. And we always talk about the inflation. We always talk about this is great now, but it can't go on, forever. So and when I look at like all these, like, analytics and like stocks and stuff, it shows like the where we were in like 2007 and 8 before it, like the bubble popped or whatever.
Right.
And it's like we're even higher than we were then, and still nothing has happened. So I mean, do you think that it's gonna, like you just said, it's gonna happen, but when?
Nobody knows. I mean, this is what Wall Street does every minute of every trading day.
Wow.
And we have people on Yahoo Finance all the time. Everybody, there are some things they broadly agree on. So for example, one thing, there's a famous saying, don't fight the Fed. If the Fed is trying to achieve monetary, some goal through monetary stimulus, and it's trying to bring the economy back from a shock, get on board, ride that wave. And that's
Right.
what's been going on. That is exactly what's been going on since March of 2020. A couple of things to think about. So if I say this can't go on forever, well, here's what does go on forever. I mean, the stock market always rises over time. It always rises over time. That includes all the downturns, and that's just because the economy grows, population grows, and corporate profits grow.
Right.
So that means stock market returns, which are basically a measure of corporate profitability, will always go up over time as long as you have a growing economy and as long as you have a growing population. Population growth is actually really important. People get this wrong, but it's really important to a healthy economy. But in the middle, that's the long term. In the middle term and in the short term, of course, stocks can go down. They have gone down, and that has to happen again. And when stocks do go down by, whether it's 5%, 10% would be a correction. 20% is considered a bear market. That won't necessarily be bad. People will lose money, but people have made a lot of money, during the last, what are we talking here? 17, 18 months.
Yeah.
And, sometimes there's a reset, and that reset is sometimes necessary to take the froth off the top, and to get valuations down to more realistic levels. So it will happen. I mean, the smart money normally has some cash on the sidelines so that when stocks do go down, or whatever asset you're paying attention to, when that goes down, and you feel, no one ever knows when you're at the bottom in
Right.
real time, but when you feel like it crosses a threshold that becomes a buying opportunity, you buy some, it goes down more, you buy a little more, and so on. So that is how the professional investors are thinking about it. But I think it's fair to say that this rally we've had since the pandemic first exploded in 2020 has surprised just about everybody.
Right. No, I totally agree. And you know what's funny? What you just said is kind of like an interesting mindset. So if you don't know, like you said, the professionals look at it like that. Me as someone who, because you probably know this better than I do. It seems like there's been thousands of people that are now into stocks because of everything with GameStop and Reddit and all this stuff that's happened. So the typical mindset is like, oh, I just spent $100 and now it's tanking. The professional will look at that as like, this is a great opportunity to put another $100 into it and more money. But the average Joe is like, screw that. Like, I don't want to waste any more money. But you made a good point, is that's an even better investment opportunity.
Well, what the professional investors say all the time, and I want to emphasize, I'm not qualified to be an investment advisor. I don't have the training, I don't have the qualification, the certification, or the degree. But we interview these people all the time, and
exactly,
this is what we do at Yahoo Finance. They say, to be a good investor, you have to take the emotion out of it. Don't get upset if a trade doesn't go the way you want it to go. And just understand what's happening in the market, and then understand how to react to it. Nonetheless, people, including people with a lot of money, get emotional about things when they lose money. Some people get angry. Some people they want to blame somebody. They want heads to roll. They call their investment advisor. How could you let this happen? We know from downturns, when we're interviewing money managers, one of the toughest things money managers have to do when stocks are down 10%, or God forbid they're down 20%, is tell their clients, just sit tight, don't sell. That's not always the right move, but if something goes down and you sell, Well, you're selling low.
Right.
I mean, you don't make money by buying high and selling low. You make money by buying low and selling high,
Right.
but that's a lot harder than it sounds, because to sell high, you have to hold on when things don't look good. On the other hand, there are cases when something is just a real bomb. And, there's no better example of that than what happened during the financial crash in 2008. I mean, nobody imagined that a trading house as prominent as Lehman Brothers would go bust.
Right.
And they did. And a lot of other ones would have gone bust too, if not for the bailouts that Americans really hated. But those bailouts did save the financial system, and they saved a lot of people a lot of money.
Right.
For ordinary investors, here's the way I think about it. And this is kind of what I've learned to do. And I wish I had learned this 20 years sooner, but better late than never, I guess.
Right.
First of all, whatever you have, your 401k or any money you can put in, even a small amount of money in an investing account can be invaluable, because you're going to learn. If you invest in a few things and then just watch what happens to them over time, you're going to learn a lot. So I think the smartest money managers say it doesn't pay to be a day trader. People think they can outguess the market. They can't. You pay transaction costs that lower your returns. The thing to do is to buy index funds. Just bet on the market as a whole. You can vary that. There are index funds and ETFs. I personally buy ETFs now, not mutual funds. But you can invest in different sectors. There are, I think, literally thousands of ETFs, which are just baskets of stocks organized in all different ways. There's value. There's financial, pick an industry. If you like telecom, there's a telecom ETF, several actually. So you can mix it up that way, mostly buy funds and stick with them. And then if you want to trade a few stocks to learn what it's like to trade stocks, do that. But to my mind, more than a few, you really better know what you're doing, or just be willing to lose money, because it's hard to make it's hard to beat the market by trading individual stocks. And you're going to have more transaction fees, even if you think trading is free. Sometimes the price you're getting includes fees for, somewhere along the way. So nothing's really free. And, that's just something else you have to keep in mind. And the last thing is opportunity cost. If you've got your money, if you're trading stocks and you got your money in that, well, you don't have your money in something else that could just be a nice, stable investment that gives you returns over time.
Right. Listen, what you're saying is literally blowing my mind, because this is exactly like what you just described is exactly what I did. And what I know a lot of people do that are coming in that are new, they're thinking, especially when they see the Reddit stuff and the game stuff, they're like, oh, I mean, I've seen people posting stuff all the time where they've made like $100,000, where they've made millions of dollars in a couple of days because of these things. And everyone else is like, oh, well, that's easy.
Roaring Kitty is the poster child for this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he became a millionaire or a multimillionaire, and now he's like giving investing advice. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, it's like, exactly. But it's like, that's like a complete anomaly of someone following something. And I literally was on for like weeks. I was on the same Reddit. I forget what the Reddit thread was called.
Wall Street Bets.
Wall Street Bets. Yeah. And it was like, I was like, oh, everyone in the comments was like, oh, this is going to go to the moon. This is, and then I'm looking at the stock. I'm like, oh, it's only like 70 cents. It's it's like, let me get this. And then like you just said, is like, that's basically day trading. And then having like 20, 30 stocks in your portfolio that are like never even heard of, aren't really in these EFTs and stuff like that, which makes total sense now that I'm actually talking to someone who knows about finance.
Well, have you made any money doing that?
I have actually. But not a lot. Like my mindset was
estimate. Like, so remember, I just said the 1 year return. Again, I'm looking at it. The 1 year return on the S&P 500 is 31%. Do you feel like you've made more than 31% over the last year?
No, I would say I was more the average.
What do you think you've made? 10%?
Probably like 10, 11%. Yep.
Okay, so you're behind. If you had just parked that money in an S&P 500 exchange traded fund or ETF, you'd have more money.
Right. Exactly. No, that's exactly right. Now I'm thinking like, all right, I need
boring.
It is boring. I know. That's exactly what it is. It's
But
very
then,
boring.
then say to yourself, well, I'm willing to accept a lower return because I'm entertaining myself. It's a cost of entertainment. I'd rather entertain myself, going to a football game or something, but it's cheaper. That's
No,
saying
way
something
cheaper.
because football isn't cheap.
I know. That's so true, man. Because that's really what it is. I think it's also like the get rich quick mindset too of like, oh man, it could blow up. It could, if Elon just puts another tweet out real quick, then this Dogecoin will just
Dogecoin.
will blow up or whatever. So
So I bought a meme stock. I did not participate in the meme stock. I'm looking this up on my phone here.
Yeah.
I did not participate in the meme stock frenzy. And, if as a journalist who covers this stuff, I have to be prepared to disclose any stock I own. And I should not own any stock that's in something I cover on a regular basis. Okay. But I thought, let me just buy one of these and see what happens. So somewhere along the way, BlackBerry was one of the meme stocks that was supposed to go. It was going to take off any day now, right? And I looked at it to make sure it hadn't already risen by 400%, and I was buying late. It hadn't. So this was about 4 months ago. I bought a small amount of BlackBerry, just because once you own something, you're going to follow it and find out what happens. So far, I've lost $600.
Oh wow.
My total return is terrible. So BlackBerry hasn't gone anywhere, and I'm glad I put only a very small amount of money into it just as a test to see what happens. And I thought maybe I'll get a story out of it. And I think the story is meme stock investing failed me personally.
Yes, that's not smart.
And I'm not embarrassed to say it because I also did not put a lot of money in, but
right. But there are a lot of people that put in lots of money on these things that they hope explode because of some Reddit or of a tweet from someone.
Yep.
Oh my God. You said terrible. That was funny.
Terrible.
Let's talk about crypto for a second.
Sure.
Is that okay? Tell you a little story. This is crazy. This really makes me angry. So in 20, I think it's like 11 or 12, a friend of mine, David Fuchs, he's a filmmaker and a really, really popular artist. He's making a documentary called Bit by Bit about Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. And he was coming to DC. So we filmed some legislators and some politicians, some really high level people. And he's like, I think my fee was like $5,000 for like 3 days of shooting. And he's like, listen, I'll pay you in Bitcoin. And I'm like, we were interviewing people. So I've never heard of it until I was interviewing these people. And he's like, I'll pay you in Bitcoin. I'm like, no, man, give me my cash money. I want my $5,000. And
I'm looking up Bitcoin. I'm gonna, as you're telling this story, I'm gonna calculate how much money you made. So when was this?
This was in 2011. 2012. Yeah. I mean, it was like pennies to the dollar. And I was like, I don't want $5,000 worth of Bitcoin. And so he paid me in 5,000. And he, keep in mind, is a millionaire now, living in a beach house in Miami, like with a G-Wagon.
So 5,000. Somebody's going to try to think $5,000 in Bitcoin in 2011 would have been.
It was like $100.
I mean, you'd be retired.
I know. Listen, Rick.
That would have been that could have been. It was like $1.
I know. It was like nothing.
It would have given you 5,000 Bitcoin, which is now worth $50,000. Okay.
Millions.
Yeah.
Millions. Literally. And then I shoot myself in the foot. So I'm
just going to calculate how much you've lost here as you're talking. Okay.
Yeah,
got a calculator right next to you. So 5,000 Bitcoin times, and I always put in the real numbers. That would be, I'm sorry. Okay, Corey, you would have $250 million.
250 million?
I'm assuming a Bitcoin price of around $1 back then.
It was like
$3.
It was nothing. It's like it basically like
you would be at least an 8-digit millionaire. 8-figure millionaire.
Jesus.
What'd you do with that $5,000?
I paid rent or something. Like live my life.
You could have bought the whole complex. All right, I'll stop rubbing it in,
dude. And then listen, he's a good friend of mine. So like he hits me up. I think it was 2 years ago. And he's like, hey man, we're doing Bit by Bit 2, come and film. And this is when Bitcoin was $10,000.
Yeah.
And he's like, listen, because I only came down for the day to shoot. And he's like, it was $1,000 because I hooked him up. And he's like, listen, I'll give you $1,000 in Bitcoin. And I'm like, definitely not. Cause now it's 10 grand. You're giving me basically like 1/10 of it. And then sure as shit, 6 months later, 50 grand. And I'm like, can I get, like, next time you offer me a Bitcoin, I'm taking it. Cause
you should.
Yeah. Like it's so funny that, and I talked to him this morning because he's going to come on the podcast, but it's like, it kills me every time when I tell people this story, because I'm like, literally millions of dollars.
We had, if I remember right, we had a guest on Yahoo Finance who thinks Bitcoin is going to go to $700,000.
Oh my God.
Now that doesn't mean it will.
Right.
Bitcoin could also go to zero.
Right.
It could also go to zero, which anybody who buys Bitcoin needs to remember.
Right.
I have no idea. I find 700,000 hard to believe, but
yeah. No, that's my thought. I'm like, especially when I'm interviewing these people, I'm like, these people sound like Looney Tunes when I'm interviewing them back in 2011. And of course, they weren't wrong. So, but anyway, I just thought that was a funny story, and talking to someone in finance can kind of understand.
Well, I'm glad you have a sense of humor about it.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, what am I gonna do? I mean, I probably went to dinner. I was like, oh, let's go get some dinner. It's $5 grand. Yeah, that sucks. All right, so let's back up real quick. I want to talk about this, the GameStop and stuff like that. Do you don't put much stock into that kind of stuff, right? I would assume not.
Well, so the conventional Wall Streeters they just cannot stand what has happened with these meme stocks, because it just drives them completely bananas that there is no fundamental reason these stocks should have gone up. And, the fundamental reason being that it's just the company's profitability. I mean, there's just, so when you do valuation metrics, and again, I'm not an expert in this, but valuation is you just take a company's, you'd look at all their financial data, cash flow, expected future cash flow and stuff like that. And that's how the market determines, that's how on paper you would determine the value of a stock. And then of course, the market just determines the value based on who buys it and who sells it. Right. They have said that with regard to all these companies, AMC, GameStop, I forget what some of the other ones were. BlackBerry was supposed to be one, but it wasn't. So I guessed wrong there.
Nokia.
Yeah. Okay. There's just no reason these stocks should have gone up 400% or whatever they went up. Right. However, there is another factor, which is supply and demand. So if demand for a scarce asset goes up, but there's no increased supply in the asset, then the price goes up. And that is also a fundamental of markets, is that when more people want to buy something, if it's a fixed supply, the price is just going to go up. I mean, that's just simple economics. And that is what happened with these stocks. So because there was this buying frenzy, it created new demand, and that pushed the price up. Now, it shouldn't have what the market experts can't, I mean, there really is no explanation. There's no link between any change in the financial fundamentals of these companies and the increase in demand. The increase in demand just came because a bunch of people said buy it. I mean, it was just like a full-on craze, like the tulip craze in the 1600s. So if that's what happened, then we should have reversion to the mean, and we should go back to fundamental values at some point, which means that these stocks are going to tank at some point. And that's what the market experts expect to happen. But they've also learned another important lesson. I mean, when you think the value of something is going to go down, you do short selling, which is you do a series of trades and effectively bet against the stock, and you bet that it's going to decline in value rather than go up in value. But that is a time limited trade normally. Yeah. And a lot of people who have made a lot of money on short selling because they have guessed right about overvalued stocks and bet against them, and then they've come down. And when they come down, you make a lot of money. That has not happened fast enough for the short sellers to cash in. And so they've run out of time basically, and they had to cash out their positions. So with these stocks, short selling is actually an important market mechanism because it keeps stocks honest. It's a way that the market can target things that are overvalued and keep valuations in check. That is not working with the meme stocks the way it normally does. Right. That doesn't mean those stocks are going to stay up. I mean, I think it's highly likely that those stocks crater at some point. But they have already stayed up way longer than almost anybody thought they would, and for reasons nobody ever thought they would see.
Right. So they stayed up too long for short sailors to make money off of them.
Right,
well.
because
Yeah.
that's a timed trade.
Right.
In many cases. I mean, it may not be technically timed, but you don't make money if you just stay in that trade for years.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Those are not.
And if you've
stocks.
got your money in that trade for years, that you're not using your money for other investments either.
Right.
So
Right.
So that takes the value out of a short trade.
Definitely. So I have a couple more questions, but as far as like finances and stuff that you typically cover, you interview a lot of people with stock market knowledge and stuff like that. But what kind of stuff do you typically cover that you could consider yourself more or less as an expert in? You know, I know you're a journalist, but like, as far as, is it like the economics of like the government? Is it economics of like, you know, people budgeting, stuff like that?
I mean, honestly, I don't consider myself an expert in anything except I'm an expert in gathering information. I mean, that's
Right.
what journalists do. So, I mean, I have to report everything that I write. I have to report it and talk to experts and figure out what they think. And everything changes. So you think you know something one day, but then it changes, and you didn't understand what just happened. So you have to go learn that. I mean, I know a lot about how the government works. I know a lot about the politics of getting things done. I know how to read what goes on in Washington, though I have a lot of help. I mean, I have, sources who are explaining to me, here's what's really going on in Congress. Here's how the one side is posturing. Here's how the other side is posturing. Here's how it's likely to come out in the end, somewhere in the middle. Here's what the middle ground is going to look like. I guess if I'm an expert on anything, it's being skeptical of anything that people say publicly and always trying to figure out what's really going on. What do people really mean? But I mean, I'm covering, Joe Biden's tax policies. Is he going to get the tax hikes that he wants? All this social safety net spending, is he going to get that? If he does get it, will it be good for the economy? What about the environmental legislation? How would you prioritize these things? If Biden can only get half of what he wants, what's the right half? What are the most important parts of it? I know how to look for this stuff and find the answers, but I don't always know the answers myself. I have to ask people who are smarter than me.
Right. Yeah. That's one thing I talked about. Like I said, the economists and stuff like Anthony Davies and James Harrigan, I talked to them quite a bit about, like, when, especially during COVID, it was the 2.9 trillion, even Trump, when he was president, it was like this amount of money is like that was going. And then when we started like peeling back the onion of like where it's going, was kind of like, wait, if it's $2.9 trillion, why can't every single person in the United States get X? Why are we sending $100 million to whatever studies in Israel, or, what I mean? So do you have any like insight on like, how the hell are we going to pay this back? And
yes.
Yeah. And why did we give this money to all these different things?
Yeah, I mean, those are two complicated questions, but I'll try to give a concise answer.
Right.
So I covered the last recession, which was the one in 2008 and 2009.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things smart people learned from the last recession is the government didn't do enough. And you can argue what is the right amount, what's too much, what's not enough, and so on. But one useful way to measure whether the government did enough is how long the recovery took. And the recovery after the 2008-2009 recession was very, very slow. This gets politicized and people say, oh, that's because Obama, blah, blah, blah. Trump did better, blah, blah, blah. The president normally has very little to do with the economy, and everybody should just stop thinking like that.
Yep.
There are presidential policies do make a difference on the margins for sure. But the economy does its own thing. And the idea that I have these arguments with people. If people think Obama did a great job and Trump did a terrible job, or the other way around, in reality, if you look at the data, the economy just kept going from Obama to Trump, and the trends barely changed from Obama to Trump. Right. And that just tells you the economy wasn't responding to either president. It was just doing whatever it did. But at any rate, so here's one measure. How long did it take to get all the lost jobs back from the 2008 recession? I think it took like 6 years. Again, I could look this up in about a minute. So if I'm getting that wrong, excuse me, but it was around that time. That's too long. We needed a faster recovery because that whole time people are suffering,
right?
And income inequality is getting worse, and the people on the margin are falling into a black hole they can't get out of. People cannot build wealth, which means that they're always living paycheck to paycheck. We needed a faster recovery. So policymakers and economists learned that lesson. And so we just had a massive amount of government stimulus during the coronavirus. I think we're in round figures, Congress passed 6 times as much stimulus spending in 2020 and 2021 as Congress passed in 2009 and 2010. Right. And it worked. It actually worked. I mean, so you can have this bang for the buck argument, like what's the right amount in order to get back, what's the right number of $1 trillion to spend to get 6 million jobs back. You could do that math. And I mean, there is no single right number, but we have had an amazingly fast recovery. There are many factors in here. This was a different type of recession, but that stimulus did make a difference. So is it too much? We will find out in the future, but the idea is the faster the economy recovers, the faster you get people to work, the more people you have working, the more people you have paying taxes, and the more people you have contributing to a growing economy. And we have to have a growing economy, and we have to have improving productivity to get out of this debt hole. So we now have so the flip side of this is we had a big debt hole before, and it's now almost 1/3 bigger. Right. So I think the total national debt is $29 trillion. No one even knows how much $29 trillion is. It sounds insurmountable, but it's not insurmountable. And a couple of reasons it's not insurmountable. First of all, we never have to pay back the whole national debt. At some point, we're going to have to pay it down. It's going to have to be smaller as a percentage of the overall economy. And one thing that will trigger a crisis here is when interest rates start to go up and the interest payments on that debt start to get higher. That's going to be a big problem. Mm-hmm. But there's a big solution, which is a value-added tax. Every advanced country in the world has a value-added tax, or a VAT as it's called, except the United States. We don't have one. And when the time comes that the United States has to raise a lot of money in a hurry, that is one way to do it. There are other ways to do it. You could just raise the taxes that are already on the books, and Biden wants to do some of that. But if you really need a lot of new money, you impose a value-added tax, which you can think of as a national sales tax. It's not exactly, but you can think of it as a national sales tax. So, for a lot of stuff you buy, and you could exempt things like food, necessities. But for many things you buy, if you're buying a TV, you might pay an extra $5 in value-added tax, right? And that will raise trillions of dollars if necessary. It might also cause a recession if we have to do that, but we'll get through the recession with a more stable budget on the other side.
Right. That makes total sense, and
that's just one. I mean, there are many ways to fix the budget problem, but that's a straightforward one.
I didn't know that we didn't have to pay it all back. I never knew that. That's interesting.
We just have to make interest payments.
Right. Wow. That's crazy. And you said what you said about the mindset of people thinking the president has something to do with everyday life. That's the one thing that I took away from when I talked to the other economists. They were like, if you think that any president, no matter who it is, has anything to do with your day-to-day life, you are mistaken. For the most part, that has nothing to do. That's not going to affect who's in office, really your day-to-day life on a typical basis, which is true. And I think people need to hear that, because people get so riled up about these things. Oh, that's going to take this away from me. It's like, is it really though? No, it's not. Yeah. So
I have family in the South, and we recently had a family get together, and I love my family. We have a good time together. We get along great. Mostly we don't talk about politics. But my
Same.
Uncle Mark wanted to talk to me about critical race theory. And this is not something that I don't cover critical race theory. I'm aware of the argument.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I said, his kids are grown, they're out of school. My kids are grown, they're out of school. And I said, Mark, why are you suddenly all riled up about critical race theory? How does this affect your life? And he looked at me kind of, for a second, he said, well, I care about the direction of this country. I was like, I do too. That wasn't the question. My question was, you're all riled up about this. Let's be honest, because your people on TV are telling you should be really angry because something's happening in schools, blah, 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 and blah. And I said, I'm not defending it. I don't, whatever, but whatever. I'm not, but I said, just tell me how this affects your life.
Right.
And he gives me this, well, it's the country. And I said, Mark, there are things like, have you ever been to like a planning session in your city or a school board meeting? Like, if you really care, go to a school board meeting. Don't just watch TV and throw peanuts at the TV. And, my ending argument was, you're getting really fired up like a lot of other people about something that has no effect on you whatsoever.
Yep.
When there are things that do affect you that you could actually be getting angry about to some good effect.
Yep, that's so true. That's exactly what
in my last book, Corey, I said, and not enough people bought it, so it's not a bestseller, I'm sorry to say. But I tried to make the point that almost nobody lives in Washington, D.C. Most of us live in a community where we have neighbors, we have churches, we have schools, we have parents. Yet we all watch TV and we all get outraged about what goes on in Washington, D.C., whether you're liberal or conservative. We're all pissed off about this. We don't live there.
Yep. All
those issues on cable TV are not the things that affect us in our homes. I mean, we have potholes. We had, I'm in New York where we just had flooding. Yep. What's the city going to do about flood control? How do we get the water back in the river? Right. Keep it out of the basement, Right. What about people speeding through the neighborhood on Google Maps? I mean, all this kind of stuff, like, you live in your community. You don't live on cable news.
Yep. That's 100% true. And that's exactly what it frustrates me too, because it's, and that's what they said too. The other people that I spoke to, they were like, the stuff that you can affect or have an effect on is go to your council meetings, be a part of those things in your local community, because they're making decisions that are going to come out of your pocket, yes. Your income or your property tax, or all these things that do directly affect you. That's so true. And I never thought of it like that, because I always had the same mindset as everyone else. Like, and granted, I lived in the area in Washington, but even living there, it was never like we had our own little neighborhood, and it was like, oh, like you said, we want to put speed bumps because people are speeding through our thing. We can't go to Biden and be like, hey, bro, can you put some speed bumps in our neighborhood? Right. No, we have to go to the District 5 courts and all that stuff. So
having said all that, there is one thing worth pointing out, is that Biden and his fellow Democrats in Congress are contemplating some things that would actually be major changes that would affect real people directly. And they have, so the stimulus checks, mm-hmm. that did affect real people directly. That was money that went to people. And when you said before, why don't they just divvy up the $2.9 trillion? Well, to some extent they did, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody got checks based on how many kids you had. And some people got a lot of money.
Right.
Federal unemployment benefits. That was $300 a week, $1,200 a month. You can have a fair argument about whether that creates an incentive for people not to go back to work. Yeah. But that is money that went to people, and it without a doubt, it helped at least some people who can't find jobs. And I've interviewed them. Yep. The other thing that Biden and the Democrats have done is this refundable child tax credit, which is a big deal. People who qualify for this, and it's a lot of people, are getting, and I forget the amount of money, but they're getting, I think, $600 a month deposited straight into their bank accounts
for like every child, I think.
Yeah, it's right. It's a per child credit. So it depends on the age of your kids and how many kids you have. So it's a variable amount of money, but that's a meaningful amount of money.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that is helping people make rent and make car payments so they can get to work.
Yep.
And Biden wants to make that permanent. So that is an example of something, like I said, the president doesn't normally have any much power to affect the whole economy,
Right.
but they can certainly affect pockets of it. And that's an example. By the way, the most important person in America is the chair of the Federal Reserve, not the president.
Really?
Yeah, the chair of the Federal Reserve does have way more power over the direction of the economy than the president does.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Absolutely. Well, I think we were talking about before.
Yeah.
And it's, it's not one person who makes the decisions, it's a board, but the Federal Reserve is the most important institution in the world of any kind.
Right.
Because it just has a massive responsibility for the US economy. When you can control interest rates, I mean, the Federal Reserve has literally created many trillions of dollars of wealth during the last 15 months through low interest rates.
Oh, right. Just
who else can do that? Who else can do that?
That's true. Yeah. And that's directly affecting people.
Yep.
Wow. All right. Last thing, I'll let you get out of here.
Yep.
Give me a top 2 or 3 finance tips you can give to people listening or watching that could help them, whether it's budgeting in their household or what stock, whatever it is. Give me 2 or 3 kind of pro tips that you've learned.
I think my best tips are the ones are the conventional ones. Start saving money early, even if no matter how little the amount. Start investing money early, no matter how little the amount of money is. Start, force yourself to put $50 a month if you can do it into an investing account. Find some place where you can do that. You can open an investing account with a small amount of money, or save the amount of money until you get started. My daughter, who is 24, she does this, and I did not do it at her age. And she's going to be a multimillionaire, and I'm never going to be a multimillionaire. And one of the reasons is she knows this. She's starting to save money, even if it's small amounts, and invest it. And I think people should invest most of their money in what the professionals tell you to do, which is just to put it in an S&P 500 ETF, an exchange traded fund. You can buy a little bit of that at a time. If you want to buy more, you buy more. When the stock market goes down, don't take it out. Mm-hmm. Actually get in the habit of buying more when prices go down if you can. And then I do think people should own a very small number of stocks, less than 10, let's say. And I think less than 5 would be fine too, just to watch them. Watch what happens to a stock. You'll understand a stock split better. For example, right. If you own a stock that splits, Apple, for example, has had stock splits. A lot of people will just buy a couple shares of Apple and see what happens. Well, if you bought 10 shares of Apple, if I remember right, they had a 4-for-1 split. So suddenly you had 40 shares of Apple.
Oh, wow.
And then you have to understand, why does that happen? Yeah, that's how you learn. You really just learn way more if you have a little bit of money invested, no matter how small.
Right.
If it's your money and something happens to your money, you're going to want to know why. And that's a great way to learn. And finally, cryptocurrency, I think it is, you don't have to buy one Bitcoin. You can buy, Bitcoin gets divided all the way down to 8 decimal points. And the smallest unit of a Bitcoin is called a Satoshi, after the so-called founder, creator. I think it's worth having. I mean, I own a little bit of crypto, and I've learned a lot more about crypto because I own some of it.
Right.
Same thing. When you own it, you want to learn about it. So you don't have to put a lot. You don't have to gamble. You don't have to day trade, but just have a little bit of it. And that'll force you to learn the trends and follow what's going on. So when you're in it, you're going to learn it.
Right. No, yeah. When you got skin in the game, it's way more.
And I'm just not a fan of day trading. Yeah. I think the odds are against you if you day trade, but people want to do it anyway. So, but don't call it investing, call it entertaining yourself, and understand that if you're a day trader, you're probably paying a high cost of entertainment. That's
exactly what it is, dude. You couldn't have said it more perfectly. So where can people find you on the Yahoo Finance? What books and stuff like that? Where can they find you?
Yep. My personal website is rickjnewman.com. I'd love people to follow me on Twitter. I'm at Rick J. Newman, and you'll find my stories plastered all over Yahoo Finance, and you can find my webpage there and follow my stories if you want. That's finance.yahoo.com.
Awesome. Yeah. And all those things will be in the description below. And hey,
Cool.
Rick, thank you so much for coming on. I
Good
really appreciate
conversation,
it.
Corey.
Yeah, man. Thank you. And that's another episode of the
Thank
E4
you for good
Explicit
questions.
podcast. Yeah, man. Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And we'll see you next time, guys.
Bye.